It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 704 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record. It's the first week of Q2 of the second quarter, 2019. How did everyone finish off March? And Q1? Finish off strong? Ready to start the second quarter strong? Well, to help you, got a great episode lined up for you today. Joining me as my guest is Pete Williams. Pete's an Australian-based entrepreneur, advisor, marketer, and author of a new book, Cadence, A Tale of Fast Business Growth. Now, today we're going to be talking about how to accelerate the growth of your business, which is wholly appropriate for a podcast named Accelerate. We're both fans, both Pete and I, of the theory, I guess, what you call the aggregation of marginal gains, which is improving every little thing you do, just 1% every day in every way, and how the cumulative impact of that is so big. Now, in his work with numerous companies, Pete's identified 7 levers that you can improve in your business that will have a large cumulative impact. And we're going to look closely at those levers and what each lever represents in terms of being sort of a moment in time in your buying process, sales process. And instead of not really a stage, but I said a decisive moment. And it's really how you perform in that moment. It's the approach you take that can have a big impact, a major impact on the results you achieve. So before we get to that, just a quick message about the Sales House, the sales growth engine for B2B sellers. And as you know, I look at growth 2 ways, both personal development growth as well as your sales growth. And you really can't get one without the other. Now, one of the most popular features for members in the Sales House is my course titled Foundations for Sales Growth. Now, if you want to learn how to effectively communicate with your prospects, to build the relationships and the trust that inspires them to want to do business with you, then you want to come inside the Sales House, learn and master these foundations for sales growth. So come be the best version of you in the Sales House. Visit us at thesaleshouse.com or just go directly to thesaleshouse.com/join. All right, let's jump into it with my guest today, Pete Williams. Pete, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Andy. Great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you here. So you're joining us from Melbourne. I pronounced that correctly,
sir.
Right? Melbourne, Australia.
That's it.
Yes. There's no R in Melbourne, despite how you see it spelled.
That's we pronounce everything like that. It's we're very lazy.
Well, my stepdaughter went to a semester in Melbourne at, I forget what school, St. something like that. And we had to make sure we got the pronunciation correct.
Absolutely.
So, well, welcome. So we're gonna talk about your new book, which you've written, called Cadence: A Tale of Fast Business Growth, and enjoyable book to read. So, what was the impetus to write the book?
Yeah, well, my core business here in Australia is a telecommunications group. We've got 3 or 4 companies across the group, and over time, we kind of looked at what was causing our growth and what was not driving growth in our business, and discovered there's sort of 6 or 7 key things that were driving profit in our business, and found they sort of applied to every business. So over time, we kind of kept evolving this sort of methodology and started sharing it with people, talked about it on my old podcast that we had for a while, and it sort of created this little movement of its own. And then eventually that sort of has to become a book at some stage, I guess. And that's how this sort of somehow sprung out over quite a lot of years in writing.
A book or a movie?
Yeah, well, hey, people, I've heard the Ben Affleck's been spoken about to play the role. So
play you, yes, okay. You're the JJ character, I take it, in the book. So, well, the key takeaways for the book really is, and I think it's interesting because I'm a huge fan of simplicity and really focusing on the basics are that you've identified 7 levers, you call it, of which is a good metaphor, if you will, for things that you can control within the business, that if you just make them just marginally better, that the cumulative impact is large.
Yeah, when we started our business, we kind of, I guess like a lot of business owners, focus pretty much on traffic and conversion. Okay, we want to grow our business. Okay, let's just get more leads in the door and let's try and sell them. And, that was great to sort of, I guess, open the doors and get some revenue through. But we kind of, hit a bit of a ceiling with our growth, and we were trying to figure out, well, what was the problem? We started, trying to work backwards in terms of, okay, how do we grow profit? And we kind of worked backwards and discovered that there were these 7 drivers of profit effectively. And once you kind of identify what they are, the real surprise for us, probably 12 months after we kind of figured out what these 7 things are, was we discovered that if you have a small 10% win in each of those 7 areas, the actual compounding effect is actually doubling your bottom line profit. So rather than having to struggle to, double your traffic to try and grow your business, just get a 10% win, 10% boost.
Better, right?
Yeah. And then the other 6 levers, which we can definitely cover, and that's the real surprising thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I enjoyed reading the book because from the perspective that I'm a huge believer, and you actually used this example, and I first wrote about this. I think 4 years ago now, an article about Dave Brailsford, and he was the manager of Team Sky, the Tour de France or Grand Tour bicycle team sponsored by Sky. And he has this philosophy, he calls it the 1% aggregation of marginal gains.
It's a bit of a mouthful, but yep.
And which is, the people I've talked about on the show before too, is that if you just assume that in sales that your margin of victory is going to be no more than 1%, right? That, first of all, there's no way really to quantify your margin of victory. But if you look at it in the case of, let's say, the Tour de France, which takes place over 21 days of racing over 3 weeks, 2,000 plus miles, that the average margin of victory between the winner, based on time, the winner and the second place finisher is usually well less than 1% of the total elapsed time. So he took that theory and said, well, that result, and said, well, if that's the case, then if we can just improve everything we do by 1%, then that's going to be the margin of victory for us on a predictable basis. So you talk about this in the book, is they look at everything from the equipment to the positioning of the riders on the bike. They spend an endless amount of time in wind tunnels.
Pillows they sleep with.
The pillows they sleep on, the nutrition, as you talked about, the massage oil they use.
It's ridiculous. It's insane.
Everything, the material on their suits, just in a pursuit of 1% improvement across a spectrum of things will contribute to a 1% victory. And as an informing concept around business improvement, sales improvement, I'm a huge believer in that, because I think that's the way the world works, right? Is you have to assume that the margin of victory is so thin. So what can you deliberately do every step along the way just to gain that thin advantage?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that. And it's so good to hear other people talking about it, because I think there's numerous benefits of that sort of philosophy. Obviously, what you beautifully articulated, probably better than I did in the book there. There's also, like, if you're looking at, I need to get a 1% improvement or a 10% improvement, it actually gives a lot of confidence and freedom, if you will, in that so many business owners I speak to and sales professionals I speak to, they're always trying to hit it out of the park.
Right.
And they try to, let's say they try to work on their proposals as a sales tool. Mm-hmm. And if they do something that doesn't double the results, I only got a 6% improvement with this proposal. I'll scrap it and go back to the original one. A lot of people actually see small gains and small wins as not improvements, as actually I only got a 5% boost. That's not worth it.
Right. So I'm going to stop doing it.
Yeah. It's hang on. That's actually the really powerful thing here, is it reframes what success is. Mm-hmm. Success isn't hitting a home run. Success is just getting on base and making those 1, 2, 5, 10% improvements. And the cumulative effect is what really drives results.
Well, first of all, I have to compliment you on your use of American baseball analogies. As when you first said hit it out of the park, I thought, okay, now does that apply to cricket as well?
Well, it could do, absolutely.
It could do, but you have spent time here in the States, so...
Exactly. And if I start talking about silly mid-wicket and googlies, people have no idea what I'm talking about. They are cricket terms, but they are the weirdest cricket terms you'd ever...
Yeah. Yeah, don't... I've watched some one-day cricket matches, which I love the one-day format, and I almost begin to understand it. And then I it's a year until I watch my next cricket match, and I've completely forgotten what I thought I knew. But it's true. As you said, reframing success, I think, is really the key here. Is that if you're always setting your sight to hit a home run instead of hitting singles, again, to indulge baseball cliches, then you are sort of setting yourself up for failure. And why not set your goals for this incremental improvement? Because if you do that on a consistent basis, then, as you mentioned before, the compounding effect is a large aggregate gain over time.
Yeah, I think the sad thing is, though, that those stories don't make the headlines on the online sales letters, or don't make the cover of Forbes. And people seem to think that the only way to be success is be an outlier, be Zuckerberg, be Musk, be one of those guys who have these massive wins, as opposed to just sort of, well, hang on, let's look at the bell curve of success and let's just make sure we're in that middle and continually growing, because that's what's sustainable and what's realistic. And if you do that, you will eventually swing in and make contact beautifully with some sort of campaign, and you will have a massive win. But it's about just being consistent with your growth and not trying to sort of just have spikes. Mm-hmm. It's a bit cliche, but it's important to get. And I think a lot of business owners and sales professionals don't think like that enough.
Yeah, well, I mean, my experience has been, and I built sales teams at a number of startups, is that, and some that were, all were intended to be high growth. Not all of them turned out to be high growth, but many did. Is that, you prepare yourself for the big spikes, right? I mean, you do what you need to do. You be consistent. You're growing. You can't really anticipate all the time the big spikes, but they happen. But if you had, then what happens? One of the problems I see a lot of smaller companies have is they get this big win, which maybe ratchets their revenue up 50%, but they don't have the process to make sure that when that big contract goes away, that they've actually continued to grow beneath it, right? To fill in that gap, so that suddenly they don't see a drop in revenue. And this is where this process that you outline, and I think really comes into fore, is just consistent execution. So let's talk about some of these seven levers that you identify. And first, we need to talk about suspects, which is really traffic, right? And any business has a requirement for traffic, or a certain lead flow, we can call it, that you then can convert into potential buyers and then buyers.
Yeah, well, the first three levers, I think, really apply. It is salesmanship. It is really your front-end sales scenario. So you've got your suspects, your prospects, and your conversions. Mm-hmm. So effectively, the definition really is suspects. If you look at it from a retail shoe store example, it's a very simple example, but I think it really clarifies the difference. Suspects are the people who walk into your retail store. Mm-hmm. Prospects are the people who put up their hand and say, look, I'm actually a really qualified prospect here. I'm a qualified buyer. I'm going to sit down and try on a pair of shoes. And then your conversions are obviously those people who open up their wallet, give you their credit card, and make a purchase. Nothing majorly revolutionary here, except I think so many sales professionals and so many small businesses, or even enterprise businesses, don't take the time to actually differentiate suspects and prospects. Mm-hmm. They keep the one bucket called leads.
Right.
And the biggest issue I see is that, and this talks perfectly to sales professionals, is that the conversation you have with a suspect is very, very different to a conversation you have with a prospect. Even though they're both technically leads, the actual conversation shifts. As soon as someone puts up their hand and says, no, I'm showing you that I am actually seriously interested, I am qualified, I am willing to engage in a more in-depth, conversation, you need to be aware of that shift and change your conversation. In that, when I used to, when I was at university, I worked at Athlete's Foot, the shoe store franchise. And one of the big things they really taught us, which has kept with me, 20 plus years, is that when someone walks into the footwear store, the conversation you have initially is not to sell them a pair of shoes. The conversation you have with them is to get them to try on a pair of shoes. Mm. And once they sit down with that shoe on their foot, then you sell them the shoe. And it was very subtle, but really quite pivotal in the way, I looked at sales. And then even with our, telecommunications company now and our e-commerce businesses and everything else, we really make sure that our team really understand the difference and what that person does to signal I'm no longer just a tie kicker or a suspect. I'm actually a real prospect. And I think so many sales professionals don't take that time to figure out what that micro commitment is to make that shift. Because once you can make that shift, you can really say, okay, here's our suspects. I'm going to try and get a 10% boost in the amount of people who make that micro commitment and become a prospect. And then once you speak to your prospects, then it's about getting a 10% boost in your conversions of getting those prospects to actually buy.
Right.
And I think that's a really big distinction.
Well, it is. And I think from a business to business standpoint is that what that critical step really is, at least in my mind and based on my experience, is that it's how effectively you qualify that suspect. So,
absolutely.
So there are certain levels of commitment that we'll call them suspects just to stay in line, have to make in order to become a qualified prospect.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily raising their hand to try on a pair of shoes, because they could take a demonstration of your software and still not be a qualified prospect. But there's certain commitments they have to make relative to their internal process they've gone through to prepare themselves to make a decision that if they haven't done, then they're not ready. They're not ready to be a prospect. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so to give you an example, in our telco group, we're purely B2B. So from our, selling of phone systems, which is one of the core things that our business does, is, our sales team's first MO or first objective is to get that person to agree to a site inspection, allow us to send a technician to site to actually spend 15 minutes with them to actually analyze their current infrastructure and their technical needs and things like that. So that's one of our signals that shows a person is actually not just wanting to get quotes, they're actually willing to engage with us and actually allow a technician to come to site at no cost. Also, then it's getting a quote. That's a micro check move that actually gets that person to put up their hand and go, yep, I'm a serious prospect. I'm getting an actual quote. Not just having a conversation, they're willing to actually, speak to us properly, not just getting a price. It's like, oh yeah, it's like, no, let's talk for half an hour and actually really understand what your needs are. Like there's some of those micro commitments in that B2B space that really help distinguish the difference between a suspect and a prospect.
Yeah, and one I would suggest for you to consider using in your business as well as the people listening is you have to get in my mind, what's most successful is, and through my experience, is to get the prospect to commit that they've actually thought through to the end and they have a pretty concrete vision of what they're going to achieve with the product or service they're buying. If they just think, yeah, give me a price just because I'm investigating, yeah, I'm not interested, right? I'm not going to give you a quote just because you're investigating, you're interested in what the price is. You can go on my website and get that. But if you're thinking, hey, this is a part of a solution for some problem we've got, or it's a solution to what we want to try to achieve, well, what's that going to be worth to you? So I think if you're in a business-to-business sense and your prospect doesn't understand sort of what the dollars and cents will mean to them from investing in your product, they're not a prospect yet.
That's a great articulation. I really like that. It's getting the customer to articulate what their real outcomes and end vision is. It's nice. And
then quantify it. See, it's one thing to say, yeah, we want this, but you're going to buy this system. What's the outcome you want? Well, it's increase in market share. Well, how much market share?
Yeah.
Well, 2%. What's that mean to you in terms of dollars? Oh, well, that's an extra $100,000 a year. Well, great. Well, let's do $100,000 a year. Our system costs $20,000 a month or $2,000 a month, or whatever. Then you just do the calculation. But before that, you really can't do the calculation to see whether it makes sense for them.
Yeah, it's a very elegant way of doing it too.
Yeah. So anyway. All right, so love that. Suspects, prospects, conversions. Again, we're just trying to get incremental improvements in all of those. And as you write about, which I think is such an important thing for people to keep in mind, is I rail about this on the show as well as when I get my soapbox when I write, is you and I talked about this before we started recording, is that people are overhyping what the results they claim that they can get through their systems, and people buy into this and then they get disappointed. If you're subscribing to somebody that says, look, I can 10x your sales, you need to really turn around and walk the other direction and try something new, because that's not serving you. But if somebody says, look, let's just focus on getting 10% better in these 7 things, that's pretty achievable. Because you can't 10x until you 1x or 2x your sales, right?
Absolutely. You can't run until you walk.
Right. Okay. So suspects, prospects, conversions. Next lever is average. You call it average item price. I call it average sales price. But
yep.
So
you got average item. Yeah, you got average item price and average items per sale.
Mm-hmm.
So effectively, it's what's the average price of the products and services you offer to your customers, and how many items do they buy when they make an actual purchase? Are they buying the core product plus some auxiliary items? Are they buying the running shoes with a pair of socks? Are they buying the phone system with headsets, conference phones, other bits and pieces? Are they buying your accounting services plus life insurance? What other additional things are you selling in that one transaction, in that initial transaction? It's the upsell, cross-sell, add-on type. Would you like fries with that?
Salad.
That's it. It's overused analogy, but it's real. And I think so many business owners and so many sales professionals do get caught up in making that core sale and don't think about the whole of wallet, and whole of wallet in terms of benefit driven. What else does the customer really need to actually achieve the results you had them articulate in such an elegant way earlier? When you're defining that, the prospect, the outcomes and tangible, quantifiable outcomes, it's like, okay, well, what else can we offer them to help them really get that result? And that's sort of a really conscious thing to think about, is what are you putting in place to actually get those, small increases? And sometimes, depending on what you are selling, whether it's B2C or B2B, even in the B2B role, there's very subtle ways to get those 10% wins. A number of years ago with our proposals for our phone systems, we had our core offering of what the person spoke about with our salesperson. Here's the phone system. Here's your bits and bobs. We put another page in the proposal, just optional extras, and just listed 4 other key optional extras: headsets, conference phones, 800 numbers, stuff like that. And it was a very subtle sell, but we found a significant increase in the amount of items per sale people were purchasing just by actually adding the extra page into the proposal. And these are the type of 10% wins we're talking about. Is it doesn't have to be grandiose, implementable projects. It can simply be, okay, well, hang on, how else can we subtly have an additional items per sale offer in our sales funnel? And it could be just adding an extra page into your proposal with a very subtle optional extras. Have you thought about these things?
Right.
And allow them to tick that on their own. And you'll be surprised how many, customers will actually be like, yeah, do you know what? I have just, spent $10,000 on a phone system. I'll spend, another $500 on headsets. It's not a big decision for people to make, and you can do it very subtly. And these are the types of 10% wins we really encourage people to think about and implement.
Yeah, well, a great point. I mean, upsell, cross-sell, you use those terms. People tend to think about it in terms of, something that happens online. But even as you point out, in a B2B environment, there are things that could be important to the customer. We tend to make the assumption for them that, they don't want to learn about that now, or they'll be kind of off-put if we bring up these extras. And my belief is you don't want to make that decision for the prospect. If you're doing it respectfully, if you're doing it, as you said, you're just adding a page in your proposal, that could be information they find valuable. And you haven't specifically addressed it in your sales process. That's fine. Don't be afraid.
And something else we've done, another 10% win that we implemented was putting together buyer's guides. And actually, phone systems can get complex. Generally, the person who's buying the office phone system is not technical. It's often the office manager or small business owner. They do it once every 5 or 6 years. Yep. So we put together a buyer's guide, and that buyer's guide is designed to educate them about the whole buying experience with checklists of all the things you kind of need to really make your phone system, sing and dance effectively. And that buyer's guide, we make it no excuses, but it gives suggestions of getting the most out of your phone system, which means buying optional extras. And we give that away as part of our, prospecting process. And that has generated, at the time, a boost of, increase in items per sale. That's another way we implement a 10% win. And the whole process really about all this is to identify what the 7 levers are in your business, and then have sessions with your team going, okay, what is a idea we can implement to get a 10% boost this cycle? Go through all your 7 levers, and then you go through it again. So, one win was the proposal page. Another win was a buyer's guide that helped increase items per sale. And you just keep thinking about what other sort of ideas we can do and continually stacking these 10% wins because they continue to compound on each other over and over again.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying though is once you've like the buyer's guide is that's not just part of a campaign. You have that and you continue to use it.
Consistent, absolutely. Yeah, it's just part of our onboarding.
Well, and the thing about that too is with those buyer's guides, small things like that really can become the tiebreakers. And final decision for the prospect.
Absolutely.
And that's another way to really think about it is, what are these sources of value that you can provide to a prospect that don't carry a ton of cost for you, but that do have value for the prospect? Because there's actually been research on this. Some professors, I think out of Harvard, who did it. Actually, I think it's published in Harvard Business Review. I don't know if they're actually out of Harvard themselves, but about this topic of tie-breaking selling. And they said, when you do have competition with products that are in the mind's eye of the customer, level, right? There's no one really stands out. Is the thought among most salespeople is, well, they make the decision based on price, and actually, the research finds is they don't. They prefer to make it on some sort of source of value that may be a little less tangible, but still important to them. And I think that something like a buyer's guide that, ostensibly they don't have to pay for, but it does provide value for them to help understand the decision they're trying to make and the scope of it. That could be a tiebreaker.
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing is we iterated that over time. When we first put it in, we kind of put it in place as a conversion tool to actually, help differentiate us. So it was purely written as a way to sort of, effectively why us over our competition? Because, like you said, we sell effectively the same phone system brands that our competitors do. It's the same bit of plastic, literally. So the actual thing we sell is absolutely no different to anybody else. It's like car sales, a Ford's a Ford's a Ford. It's the same car. So we had to figure out how can we differentiate and get more conversions. And we felt a buyer's guide was really handy because it could really get people to think about buying a phone system with the right partner. It's not about the plastic, it's about the way it's installed and programmed and serviced and trained. So that was originally when we put it in, it was for that. It was put in for a conversion win. But then when we sort of cycled around and went, okay, let's work out how we can get a 10% boost in items per sale, we went, oh, hang on, we could improve and iterate our buyer's guide to actually include stuff about other things you want to think about. So this is the thing is, the buyer's guide was put in place originally for one lever, but then iterated to actually increase 2 levers. And that's kind of the way we think about stuff. Right.
Okay. So in a few minutes we have left, then there's 2 remaining levers. One is you call it transactions per customer. I call it lifetime customer value. Is
Absolutely.
A term that's used quite a bit these days.
Absolutely, obviously.
Yeah. So that is, to me, is perhaps one of the easiest ones to some degree, because so many of the factors underneath are in your control, right? Is the level of service you provide, level of value you provide, they're already a customer. Getting repeat business is a less expensive proposition from existing customers than from new prospects. So take us through that.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think you're right, it is probably the most powerful. It's actually probably one of the most overlooked, ironically. I know for us, when we started our business, we started our telco business literally with no telco experience. We found a gap in the market and kind of went into that space. So we started our business as a sales and marketing company. We were generating the sales and inquiries for phone systems, and we were literally giving our customers to our competitors to do the installation because we weren't technicians.
Sure.
So we were literally saying, okay, we made the sale. Okay, let's find a subcontractor to do the installation. And they were effectively stealing our clients because, once someone wanted to upgrade their system, buy more, who are you going to go back to? The people who basically just took your order, or the person who turned up at your office, installed it, trained it, and actually built a relationship? So initially it was really great for us to test our business model. We were able to prove we were able to make sales and generate leads, but we were getting no repeat business because of that core business model flaw that at the time we didn't see.
Right.
So it was really that sitting down going, hang on, why are we getting no repeat business? And then kind of figuring out what now is pretty obvious. That is what triggered this whole 7 levers discovery, really, for us, ironically. But so many business owners, whether they have a business model that doesn't allow for repeat business and much LVC, so many business owners just don't even think about it. It's always about, get me the good leads, the Glenn Ross kind of movie. It's like, where's the good leads? I need new leads. And, they don't think about putting something in place, or they do and they've forgotten about it. There's horror stories I've heard of people who've, implemented the 7 levers and started working through this. And they've realized, we did write an email sequence to get customers to come back and buy from us again. But, the credit card we had in MailChimp expired 9 months ago and we forgot to update it and the emails haven't been going out. There's massive stories like that where it's just like, oh, no. So it's about, again, putting systems in place to automate that repeat transaction.
And to your point, it's you see it way too often. So, if you're listening to this and you think, oh, we do a good job of taking care of our customers, especially if you're a small business owner, you're assuming that it's happening. And to the degree you're assuming that it's happening, it probably isn't. I had one client that got involved with, and they did great work. Customers generally loved the work they did. Probably, I think 1,000 customers we determined that they had never really followed up on after they'd done the original work for them. And then another friend who was a consultant that was going to work for us, doing a project for one company. And similar thing, they were looking at, okay, how do we take advantage of, try to leverage our existing customer base and maybe some past customers who aren't currently doing business with us. He found 5,000. Imagine a company, you have 5,000 customers, how hard it is to get a customer in the first place. And then you just let them walk afterwards.
Well, I think so many people are too busy in the weeds of their business and they think, oh, if I give really good customer service, that's enough. They'll remember me. I'll do good customer service and that they'll have a good experience. So when they come back, they want that same experience.
Right.
People's memories aren't that good.
No.
Like the question we ask people to think about, and we continually do in our business, is how many check moves are we making? In chess, it's like check, check, check. Finally get checkmate and you win the game. So like when you're looking at your transactions per customer, what automation and systems do you have in place that creates check moves? And that's the thing is like what is actually happening. Just good customer experience is not really a check move. That's just delivering on your promise originally. Right. Actually having something to actually say and remind people to come back and buy from you again, that's the check move. So what are you actually doing in your business to actually generate that repeat? And that's the key, is what is automated and actually happening, offering and asking the question.
Got it. Okay. Well, Pete, we've run out of time, but urge people to go out, get your book, and want you to tell people where they can get it and how to contact you.
Yeah, sure. Cadence, Tale of Fast Business Growth is the book. It's usual, available where all good books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, everywhere in between. Cadencebook.com is the website. You can download free chapters. You can listen to an audio sample there if you want a bit more of a taste. But yeah, it's probably the best place, cadencebook.com, and then you've got a whole bunch of places from there to kind of find me and follow me and come and say hello. Excellent. All right. Urge people to do that. Pete, thank you very much. Cheers, Andy. Okay, friends, that was Accelerate for the week. First of all, as always, I want to thank you for joining me. I also want to thank my guest, Pete Williams. Now, you want to join me again next week for a really fun conversation with my guest, Peter Loge. Now, some of you may know, and now I'm saying it, all of you are going to know, I'm a huge soccer fan. And Peter has written a book, a very interesting book titled Soccer Thinking for Management Success, and talking about how the game is played and how the game is managed. Soccer has a lot of lessons for management success, has a lot of lessons for sales success. So we're going to talk about that. And as I said, very many parallels between effective management in soccer as well as successful sales manager, and also a lot of parallels between player development at the professional level and the development of professional salespeople. And Peter's going to share all of his insights about this, so make sure you join us. And before you go, don't forget to check out The Sales House, all-in-one sales growth engine for B2B sellers just like you. So visit saleshouse.com, and we'll look forward to seeing you there. So thanks again for joining me.
Until next week, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.